The room was still, with only the dim flicker of an old lamp casting elongated shadows on the cold stone walls. You could hear the slow hum of the city outside, distant and faint. Inside the room it was silent, save for the soft breaths that you force yourself to take. With your sleeves pulled just far enough, you found yourself tracing the patterns on your arms. The urge sharp and overwhelming. You weren't sure how long you had been battling this feeling, the ache pulling at you like a magnetic force. 1,000 chaotic thoughts swirled, none louder than the demand to hurt, to release the turmoil that had settled within you. Your hands trembled as you gritted the sharp object. Your mind was at war with your instincts. You felt pathetic, hopeless. But just when you were about to give in, the door creaked open, and footsteps followed. They were light and jittery. "Hey, YN?" Jinx's voice, ever full of mischief, found its way into the room. Her usual vibrant presence was darker now, quieter than you'd ever seen her before. She must have been up late tinkering with something or other. Her usual restless energy demanded release. But today, she looked different. There was a hardness in her eyes, a careful watchfulness that made the air in the room thicken. Something shifted between the two of you. You quickly dropped the object from your hand, suddenly embarrassed, but you didn't have the energy to hide it at all. Not this time. Jinx's sharp eyes landed on your arm, her usual grin turning into something unreadable for a moment. She stood there, still and silent. Then her voice cracked with tension. "Don't you dare." Her words were quiet, but they held such authority, they sent a wave of discomfort crashing over you. Her eyes never left her face, her expression far too calm for the situation, almost as if she was studying you. A strange weight formed in the back of your chest, heavy like a boulder. I'm fine, Jinx, you don't have to worry about me." Her laugh, a soft, eerie thing, bubbled up and burst like gas from a broken pipe. It was sharper than usual. "Oh, I'm not worried. I'm interested. Why didn't you hide it? Huh? What's all this about? You think I wouldn't notice?" You remained silent, not sure how to respond. She closed the gap between you, her eyes softening, though they held an intensity that could cut through stone. Reaching out, she gently nudged her sleeve back down, brushing past her trembling skin. "I've seen worse," she continued, but her voice was no longer taunting. There was a hint of care, a dangerous softness that you didn't expect. "You don't have to hurt yourself, YN. You could just come and talk to me instead. Just, don't you think you deserve that?" She spoke, but she stuttered a few times. She seemed to be almost lost for words, which shocked you. Her words tugged at something inside of you, something you hadn't felt in a long time. You could hardly breathe in the room. The changed atmosphere clogged your windpipes. "I don't need anybody's help," you murmured, your voice restrained. "I'm fine on my own." "Oh, I get it," Jinx hummed softly, and there was that familiar edge to her words. "I'm the crazy one, right? I'm the one who shouldn't be trusted, huh?" You flinched at her words. Her finger found your chin, gently coaxing your head back up and forcing you to face her as she towered over you. But she didn't look angry, just concerned. Like the whirlwind of her emotions spinning behind her eyes was attempting to find any solid ground. "Look, YN." She knelt in front of you, her gaze softening for a fleeting moment, before her smile returned, a bitter touch of reality. "You're not alone. Not in here, anyways." She patted her chest. "It doesn't matter what the rest of the world says. We're both crazy, and that's okay." You recoiled slightly, the words hitting you harder than anything ever had. Not just the half-teasing tone, but the vulnerability, the aspect of her that all her chaos she rarely showed. But for a split second, you saw the girl behind the bombs and the chaos behind that manic smile. It almost made the ground beneath your feet falter. "But, Jinx," you whispered, your voice barely a breath. "I'm not strong enough. I just can't do it anymore." Your words cracked halfway through as you looked away, unable to meet her gaze. To your shock, Jinx's usual erratic nature softened entirely. Without hesitation, she slid to sit down beside you, her hand resting gently on your own. That manic energy might replaced with something quiet, something grounding. "It gets rough, doesn't it?" she asked. Her voice was quieter than usual, as if you were the one who might break if she moved. The silence between the two of you stretched for one long minute, but it felt like years. Jinx didn't leave, she didn't push, she just stayed there. It was a level of comfort you hadn't expected, especially not from her, and one you especially didn't know how to handle. How could someone so unpredictable be so in tune with your silence, your mess? It didn't make sense, yet here she was, holding you in the quiet. Maybe it wasn't something fixable, but it was enough. She sighed softly, her finger drawing circles on her hand like a promise to stay. "I know what it's like to just want it all to end. Not because you don't care, but because it's all just too much." Her smile came, but it wasn't twisted, it was genuine. She wasn't sad. But the thing is, you're still here, and I'm not gonna let you forget that. Before you could respond, before your emotions could even settle, Jinx's eyes widened. Her usual hyperactive nature flared out once again as her gaze darted to the door. A sharp knock echoed through the hallway, startling the both of you. Her protective instincts kicked in, and she pulled you closer in that sudden burst of wild energy. Her voice was low and frantic. "Don't make a sound," she whispered. The knock came again, more urgent this time. Jinx's eyes locked onto yours, intense and full of silent warnings. And when you thought you couldn't take the pressure of it anymore, she smirked. The glint in her eye told a different story, a mix of readiness and mischief. "Looks like our little game is far from over." Jinx's grip on your hand tightened as the urgent knock echoed louder from the door. More insistent this time. More loud, more persistent, more needing to be let in. You could hear the blood rushing in your ears. Your heart was pounding like a drum, threatening to betray you. Panic and confusion clawed at your chest, but her voice was a whisper, sharp and controlled, despite the tension. "Stay still and don't make a sound." Her words were direct, leaving no room for hesitation. The soft smirk on her lips had disappeared, replaced by a deadly focus she wore when the world seemed to not love her. You tried to settle your breath, but your body was pressed so close to hers that her warmth was offering no relief, only creating more unease. She glanced quickly towards the door, her eyes wide and her fingers now gently leaving yours. She was about to squeeze them again, to let you know she wasn't going anywhere. Then she shifted closer to you. Her presence was protective, but somehow alien. She wasn't the playful, wild Jinx now. This was a part of her you hadn't seen. A watchful, calculated part of her. The knock came again, louder, quicker now. "Jinx!" The voice outside was rough and impatient, a tone you didn't recognize. Jinx's breath was steady as she shot you a quick glance at the door. Her eyes were glinting with warning. Without a word, she pulled out her makeshift weapon, a crude piece of metal that had always been at her side when danger loomed. She gripped it with sure hands and moved closer to the door, eyes narrowing and calculating for the best action. For a split second, your stomach twisted with unease. You couldn't understand why someone would knock so urgently. Did they know you had been in here? Or worse, had they been watching you two? You swallowed, the anxious pit deepening in your gut. Jinx lifted a finger, but she just stood there for a second. For a second later, she moved that finger again to her lips, signaling for silence. Without another sound, she quickly moved to the side of the door. It was instinctual. And you'd known her to be that way. You'd always known her to be spontaneous and chaotic, and right now she was a predator moving in the shadows. From the other side, the voice called again, louder this time. "I know you're in there, Jinx." The tension heavier than ever, anything you'd ever felt. Your heart thumped so loudly you thought it would give you away. Jinx's expression shifted to something darker. She braced for a fight, but you didn't know what was coming. "Stay down, YN, and don't get up unless I tell you to." You obeyed, crouching down to the floor. Your heart was still racing. Like every second that ticked by felt like a thunderstorm. It felt like something was ready to explode. Suddenly, the door banged open, startling you. There stood a man, tall, muscular, with an intimidating air about him. His eyes burned with anger, and there was tension in his jaw, visible even in the low light. You didn't recognize him, but you couldn't help but feel small and exposed. "Jinx," the man said flatly, his eyes scanning the room. "We need to talk. Now." Jinx stood forward. "Now? I'm a little busy. I'm kinda in the middle of something," she said with a cool defiance. "You're messing around again, The man's voice was a mix of disbelief and frustration. "You know we've got people looking for you." Jinx didn't flinch. "I'm not hiding, am I?" she said nonchalantly, a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Just here, doing my own thing. Why don't you go bother somebody else?" "Quit playing games," he snapped, his voice rising, his gaze looking towards you. "Who's that? Does it look like I've got time for your nonsense?" You stood there frozen, unable to form a word, feeling the unfamiliar weight of the new threat in the room. Jinx's eyes looked momentarily towards you with a slight nod of reassurance, before she turned back to the man. "You're always full of questions, I'm not answering anything until you stop spitting at me. You got any respect for personal space?" He took a step forward, pushing past her in an attempt to look over at your shoulder, like a deer with a predator. "Things have been bad enough, Jinx," the man growled. "If you're gonna keep poking the hornet's nest, it's not just you they'll come after." Her eyes gleamed dangerously as she stepped closer to him. No fear in her stance, just a mess of defiance and wild energy. "Is that a threat?" she asked, low and venomous, moving to put herself between you and him. The man scowled, raising his hands in an effort to calm him down. "It's not a threat. You need to cooperate. Just come with me. We need to make a decision fast." Jinx shifted her weight, her lips momentarily tightened. But her expression softened, like she was seeing the weight of what was at stake. The glimpse of hesitation passed, and her manic grin came back. "No, you can get out of here, or I'll make sure you didn't come in here in the first place." She gestured sharply to the door with her weapon. The man exhaled. "You're a real pain, you know that." He reached for the belt, pulling out a comm device, ready to do whatever it took to drag her back in line. "Let's not make this worse." Jinx's smile was sharp, the menace behind her words. Before he could make another move, there was a soft bang coming from the outside, the ultimate sound of the door slamming open. Heavy footsteps followed. Somebody else was here.